Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of David Nixon. David Nixon was a friendly, ambitious, and optimistic man living in Grapevine, Texas. He had a talent for selling and was involved in trade. David married Donna Lela in 1990. The following year, they welcomed their son. He then ventured into real estate, which proved to be a successful field for him. Over time, he became one of the top agents in the city, handling million-dollar transactions. David's marriage ended in 1995 when he began an affair with flight attendant Lisa Hill. After the divorce, he stayed on friendly terms with his first wife, mainly because of their shared son, Nicholas. David then married another woman, but that marriage lasted only 2 years. He didn't remain single for long. Before his divorce from Lisa was finalized, he met a 27-year-old woman who initially overlooked his advances. Eventually, they decided to move into David's house together, which could signify his third marriage. David was known to his relatives for his love of fine and luxurious things, often owning more than his income could afford. 11-year-old Nicholas admired his father, believing David to be a wonderful man who was always willing to help the family. David was at the peak of his life when he suddenly became the victim of a horrific massacre. On the evening of April 18, 2002, a passing motorist discovered a fire and reported it to the fire department. After extinguishing the fire, the firefighters discovered a human body. They quickly called the police. In the middle of the night, a police investigator arrived at the scene of a fire at David Nixon's home in Grand Prairie, Texas. David had recently moved to the area. As the officer stepped out of his car onto the front driveway, he was hit by the horrible smell of burning flesh. He found a body wrapped in a partially burned sheet. Further investigation revealed it was an electric blanket, along with a sturdy camping tarp and rope that held everything together. When police examined the body, they found it was too charred to tell whether it was a man or a woman. However, they were able to determine that the deceased had fair skin based on the remaining facial features. It took several hours to carefully remove the body from the scene of the fire. During their investigation, they discovered several fibrous materials that could have been used to start the fire. These materials were later identified as electric blankets. Unfortunately, they did not find any other significant evidence to identify the suspect. A forensic expert analyzed the case and concluded that the victim was a man in his 40s who was murdered by a single gunshot to the heart before a fire broke out. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting that the victim was caught off guard, possibly while sleeping. The initial autopsy could not identify the victim, but police believed he was the homeowner. To confirm his identity, they needed dental records and documents, which ultimately revealed that he was David Nixon, a 40-year-old. The event was a devastating loss for the deceased's family, especially for his son Nicholas. On that day, Nicholas was supposed to call his father but couldn't reach him. The Nicholas sensed that something was wrong but had no idea that his father was already dead. From the beginning, police suspected that Tracy, David's third wife, might be the killer. Friends of the couple noted that while they generally got along, they also had serious arguments, often over finances and David's gambling debts. As Tracy's tumultuous relationship with David progressed, she discovered that he was wasting money on gambling. Their arguments became more heated in the early spring of 2002. After nearly 4 years together, they decided to separate. However, a serious tax lawsuit ensued. To protect his assets and avoid losing his home, David transferred ownership of the house to Tracy. When it came time to discuss separation, Tracy insisted on keeping David's luxurious home, which had a hidden terrace and a heated pool. David tried to negotiate with her to get his property back, but she refused to agree. In April, things escalated when David reported to the police that Tracy had changed the locks on his house without his permission. She took advantage of his absence while he was away for a work-related trip to a nearby city. That evening, the police intervened to help resolve the situation. She argued that she had invested her own money in renovating the house and wanted to keep it. However, she could not provide evidence of her financial investment, and they were unable to reach an agreement. Nearly 2 weeks later, David was found murdered. This raised suspicions, especially since he had no known conflicts with anyone else, making it plausible that Tracy may have been involved in his death to retain ownership of the house. That evening, upon hearing about David's ex-husband's death, Donna went to the police station. Donna reported that David had recently expressed concerns for his safety due to Tracy's erratic behavior. She also provided the police with David's will, which he had asked her to share, naming a potential culprit if anything ever happened to him. Despite this, David had never reported any domestic violence incidents to the police and often minimized his problems. Donna understood the risks David faced during their property division, as he consistently sought to resolve conflicts peacefully. However, it seemed that Tracy was provoking new conflicts. Donna called the police to her ex-husband's home when her son could not reach his father. Donna had previously contacted Tracy to find out what might have happened, but Tracy dismissed her concerns. Tracy said she had not been keeping tabs on David, whom she had broken up with, and suggested he might be drinking or gambling. The couple had been living together in a house in Grapevine that was the subject of a dispute. They had recently agreed that the man would be moving out to a new place in Grand Prairie just a few days before his death. Tracy later confessed that they had talked about the move, and David had asked her to rent a van to help with transporting their belongings. She did not leave him in a tough spot. Instead, she called a car service and rented a special cart to load items into the van. David packed his things and went to the new address, planning to return for the rest of his belongings. However, he never came back. The disagreements that occurred created a strong motive for the crime. From the beginning, the police were interested in Tracy. They considered her a prime suspect in the case. When the police informed Tracy of the news that David had been murdered, the police expected her to be distraught and in need of comfort after the loss of a loved one. However, her reaction was unexpected. She was indifferent, uncaring, and showed no signs of distress. From that moment on, the police began to confirm their suspicions. Tracy revealed that she and David had had a serious disagreement in the months before David's death. With tears in her eyes, she shared that just before these events, she had lost her child, which made the situation worse. Last fall, Tracy discovered she was pregnant, which coincided with the decline of their relationship. In addition, she was dealing with health issues that contributed to her emotional struggles. Realizing that it was not the right time to have a child, she chose to terminate the pregnancy. Despite her decision, she still held David responsible for the loss of the child. It's important that police found no evidence of Tracy's pregnancy, as there was no documentation to support her claims. Everything was based solely on her statements. During the first interrogation, police closely observed the Tracy, and afterward, every officer was convinced that she was not telling the truth. They noted that she gave evasive answers, appeared confused in her testimony, and her body language often suggested she was lying. The woman insisted that she was not involved in the murder and was unaware of the details surrounding it. Since Tracy refused to admit anything, the police had no evidence to confront her with. Tracy was later released from custody. Extensive searches were conducted at the scene of the massacre and in the sewer. However, much of the evidence was washed away by the fire department's efforts to extinguish the fire. Key clues included tire tracks that matched the tire tracks of the truck Tracy had rented for David's move. Small fibers of fabric similar to those used to wrap the body were also found in the sewer. It appeared that the killer had attempted to dump the body in the sewer but was unsuccessful. Although most witnesses described Tracy in a negative light, this information was not enough to make an arrest or charge. Police began reviewing surveillance camera footage near David's home, That same day, they captured footage of a young woman who closely resembled Tracy near a store not far from the residence. Although the footage was limited, it helped police reconstruct the events. After reviewing dozens of hours of video, they identified a distinctive yellow truck that had stopped near the murder scene. The tire tracks from the truck matched those found at the crime scene. They then followed the truck to a nearby driveway. Additionally, 3 days after David's murder, they spotted a white Lexus, similar to Tracy's, driving in the area. The same woman was recorded walking past the store entrance. She made a purchase and left, and store employees reported that she had purchased a large amount of cleaning products, which raised suspicion. Police recognized Tracy and began communicating with her more frequently. Despite this, she maintained that she had nothing to do with the murder and claimed that the recordings the police found were fabricated to frame her and speed up the case. Tracy gave an alibi, saying she was at her parents' house in Arlington during the time. However, police were unable to find any witnesses to confirm her whereabouts because her relatives were away. Needing more evidence to prosecute, police searched Tracy's home. They believed Tracy killed David while he was sleeping by shooting him in the heart. Forensic experts believe David may not have had time to react while he was asleep. After David's death, Tracy immediately purchased a new mattress. A shopping list from a hardware store indicated that Tracy may have been involved in the events surrounding David's death. Donna believed that the only motive for the murder was the house itself. Tracy argued that David's death would not have benefited her financially and that she deserved to inherit his house. She claimed that there was no insurance policy in David's name that would have made her the beneficiary. Since they were not legally married, she could not claim any other assets. The motive for the crime is believed to have been both money and revenge for the breakdown of her relationship. After the murder, Tracy is said to have used a yellow styrofoam truck to transport David's body. It is suspected that she planned this from the beginning to divert the investigation. Using the truck, she moved the body by loading it onto a trolley secured with straps. Tracy then took the body to the construction site of a new home. Evidence, including fabric fibers, suggests that she attempted to dispose of David's body by throwing it into the sewer at the construction site, but was unsuccessful. She left the body on the ground and returned 2 days later to carry out her plan. During this time, she was recorded on surveillance cameras several times. She then planned to dispose of the body by cremation. Tracy wanted David to be completely burned, so she wrapped his body in several layers of electric blankets. Unfortunately for her, a passerby discovered the fire and alerted the fire department. Had her plan succeeded and gone undetected, she could have disposed of the body by throwing it into a storm drain. However, fate intervened and she was unable to carry out her plan. The next day, after returning to the police station a second time, Tracy was arrested and charged with the murder of David Nixon. During a preliminary hearing, the judge granted her bail but required her to wear an electronic monitoring device until the murder trial began. Despite her guilt, Tracy had many supporters, including Roland Taylor. Roland, a local dentist and neighbor of the couple, was originally from the United Kingdom but had settled in Texas. He and Tracy had been friends for a long time. Although he had heard many accusations against her, he was convinced that Tracy was the opposite of what people claimed. He believed that David's gambling debts had created many enemies who might want to harm him. He had spent a large amount of money at the casino, which suggested that police should consider other suspects with stronger motives. After investigation, it was discovered that David had no debts. Although he occasionally borrowed money and lost money at the casino, he always paid back the money to his creditors. This made that theory absurd. Roland and Tracy then had a romantic relationship after she was released on bail, which led to their engagement. He was determined to fight for justice and freedom for the woman he loved. He helped her find a competent lawyer. And in 2005, Tracy hired a criminal defense attorney who, although experienced, had only handled 3 murder cases. However, he believed that the evidence against Tracy was completely circumstantial and believed that he could successfully secure her acquittal. The defense argued that she had been arrested within the first 36 hours of the investigation, too early to thoroughly consider all potential suspects and properly assess her possible involvement. Typically, an arrest would occur when there is clear evidence, such as a criminal caught in the act with a weapon. However, this was not her case. Investigations generally take longer to effectively identify and narrow down suspects. The defense viewed the police actions as an attempt to quickly close the case by blaming the first person they encountered. Additionally, he argued that the prosecutor's office lacked direct evidence linking her to the murder, as no DNA or fingerprints of Tracy were found in the house or truck, nor was the alleged murder weapon, a gun, discovered. The prosecution relied on the testimony of several individuals who believed Tracy was guilty from the start due to her conflict with David. Their relationship was tumultuous. Shortly before his death, David had filed a restraining order against Tracy and stopped contacting her, even though they lived in the same home. Family members noted that David had tried to distance himself from his ex-wife. The attorney learned that the police had video footage of Tracy's interrogation and requested a copy. After reviewing the material, the defense attorney became convinced that the police used deceptive tactics to pressure Tracy into providing answers. The defense argued that the Supreme Court had intentionally portrayed Tracy in a negative light from the start. One of the prosecution's key pieces of evidence was video footage of Tracy abandoning her white Lexus, moving into a rental truck, and purchasing cleaning supplies at a store near where the body was discovered. By contacting the store clerk and obtaining a receipt from the woman in the video, it was discovered that she had used a discount card. The card was registered to Tracy, saving her 19 cents on her purchase. Tracy claimed that she did not remember having the card and insisted that she would not have left such evidence behind if she were trying to move around the city undetected. Tracy believed that she had been set up. Police believed that the cleaning products found during the search of the house matched those from a local hardware store. The defense attorney has offered several theories to explain David Nixon's death. One theory is that he may have been the victim of a robbery, while another suggests that the attack may have been a targeted attack on a gambling broker over debt. The defense has also pointed to other potential suspects who seem more likely than Tracy. One of these suspects is Jerry, a longtime friend of David's. They had vacationed together at a lake house, and Jerry frequently visited their home, where he knew Tracy well. The woman suggested that Jerry may have borrowed money from David, which could have been a motive for the murder. The police decided to investigate Jerry, who quickly admitted that he understood Tracy's attempt to blame him. He was an easy target because he was a close friend of David's. Although he occasionally borrowed money from David, he denied any involvement in the case. According to Jerry, he sold his old car 2 months before the tragedy because he needed money. He asked David for a large sum of money, and David agreed to help him. However, after Christmas, Jerry paid David back all of the money. Jerry did mention that he and David had planned to have a drink that day. The last time he heard David's voice was early in the morning of the day David was murdered. On the morning of David's murder, Jerry and David spoke on the phone and made plans to meet. However, David never showed up and stopped answering his phone. It was only later that Jerry discovered what really happened. Jerry claimed that he had not seen David that day and that since there was no debt between them, he had no reason to commit the crime. When this lead failed, Tracy pointed to another potential suspect, David's first wife, Donna. Just 2 months before his death, David had purchased a $500,000 life insurance policy in New Mexico, naming their son as the primary beneficiary and Donna as the secondary beneficiary. Since the boy was too young at the time, Donna received the payout after David died. Tracy was not named on these policies, leading her to believe that Donna would benefit from David's death. After David's death, Donna received a small sum of about $10,000, which would help her support her son. She found it absurd to think that the money was a motive for the murder, noting that David would have paid her more in child support while he was alive. Meanwhile, Nicholas's son insisted that only Tracy could have harmed his father, as he had witnessed their violent arguments. Tracy's attorney argued that the prosecutor's office lacked solid evidence against her and that police had not thoroughly investigated other potential suspects since David's murder. Tracy and her attorney eventually went to trial, confident of their chances of winning because they had dismissed the prosecutor's allegations. However, the prosecution was convinced of Tracy's guilt, describing her as an unstable and aggressive. The motive behind the case centers on a house, which poses a serious threat because the David may contest the re-registration of the property in Tracy's name and reclaim it. The attorney repeatedly argued that the charges lacked forensic evidence. There were no witnesses and the murder weapon had not yet been found. The defense believed that the available evidence would not be sufficient to support the charges. Tracy believed that the case was a carefully orchestrated plot, asserting that she had been wrongly accused. She felt that the police had not investigated the case thoroughly. The prosecutor had important information from Nicholas, the David's son. Nicholas claimed that his father had kept the same pistol in a safe in the bedroom of the home David shared with Tracy. However, police were unable to find the weapon for ballistics testing. Nicholas believed that the Tracy had opened the safe, used the gun, and then discarded it. Tracy, on the other hand, claimed that David had never kept a pistol in the home and that she had never seen one. However, she could not explain why she had purchased a new mattress so soon after David's death. It appeared that the old mattress had blood on it and had become a crime scene. The prosecution said that the store staff recognized Tracy and confirmed that she had purchased a large quantity of cleaning products that could be used to remove blood. They advised Tracy to use hydrochloric acid, but it was not available in stores, so they suggested she order it online. She also purchased other items, all of which were later found in Tracy's home during a search. The prosecutor's office believed that the evidence allowed them to piece together the events of the case. The defense attempted to suggest that Donna could be the likely killer due to her strong motive. However, Nicholas's mother only received $10,000, which was insufficient to consider a violent act. They also tried to implicate David's second wife, Lisa, in the murder. Police conducted a thorough analysis of potential involvement by Donna and Lisa, examining cell phone records and geolocation data. Ultimately, they found no connection to the crime. Additionally, both Donna and Lisa had a positive relationship with David, which was confirmed by numerous witnesses. They also had credible alibis, and Lisa had no motive whatsoever. By the end of the trial, Tracy's confidence had plummeted. She expressed her frustration by saying, "I don't believe in justice anymore. I don't know how I'm going to feel after this." The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the jury found Tracy guilty of murdering David Nixon. They reached a verdict in less than 4 hours, resulting in her being sentenced to 40 years in prison. The victim's family was completely satisfied with the outcome, and many felt relieved. Roland Taylor stayed loyal to his fiancée, insisting on her innocence and visiting her in prison. With his support, Tracy filed an appeal, but it was ultimately denied. She will be eligible for parole in 2024 when she turns 55. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Yarborough. Sarah Yarborough was born on June 12, 1975, in Portland. Her family soon moved to Federal Way, a suburb near Seattle. Sarah had 2 siblings and shared a special bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, she loved music and ballet. She was dedicated to her studies, aiming to get into a good university. Her academic success allowed her to visit New Zealand twice through a school program. She later became a cheerleader at her high school and had many friends. Sarah was admired for her kindness and readiness to support those in need. On the morning of Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team for an event. They planned to gather at the school, where a bus would pick them up. Sarah drove her father's car to the school but arrived an hour early. She mistakenly thought the bus would arrive at 8 a.m., but it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends arrived, Sarah was nowhere to be found. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. When the bus arrived, Sarah still hadn't appeared. Her friends found this puzzling, but since they didn't have mobile phones back then, they couldn't contact her. At the same time, two 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds. They noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't think much of it and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they came across a horrifying sight, a young woman lying unresponsive on the ground. They feared she might be dead. The children ran home to inform their parents. One of the parents returned to the scene with them, while the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child reported seeing a car similar to a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area. Since he lived close to the school, his father decided to look for that car. He briefly spotted a similar car but quickly lost it and couldn't find it again. Meanwhile, the other child's parents went to the school and saw that the young woman on the ground was likely dead. They immediately rushed into the school to call the police. When the officers arrived, they confirmed that the young woman had indeed passed away and identified her as Sarah. Based on the marks on her neck, they concluded she had been strangled. Some of her belongings, such as her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found near her body. Oddly, her purse and car keys were found in the school parking lot, suggesting that her attacker may have assaulted her near her car and then dragged her behind some trees. The body was handed over to forensic experts, and the police started their search for clues. Their first step was to interview everyone who was on the school premises and nearby. Two kids who found Sarah gave a description of the man who came out from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall guy, around his 20s, with shoulder-length reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black pants. Soon, the police managed to find another witness, and this is where a surprising twist in the story unfolds. According to the man, he went for a run and noticed something unusual in the woods. He saw a girl lying near the bushes with a man standing over her. At first, the girl didn't move, and the man thought they were a couple being intimate. A few minutes later, running back the same way, he saw both of them still there. He didn't think a serious crime was happening. The man later told the police he had recently moved to the United States and wasn't familiar with typical behavior in the country. However, he was able to give a rough description of the man, which matched what the children who found the body described. Investigators spoke with many people who had been near the school but did not uncover any new leads. Meanwhile, medical experts examined Sarah's body and determined that she died from strangulation. It seems the attacker used his own socks, and they also found a severe wound on her. Experts believe the blow made her lose consciousness, matching the runner's report of seeing her lying still on the ground. In 1991, forensic experts examined Sarah's clothing and found traces of male hair on most of her clothing. However, there wasn't a DNA database available to compare these samples, so investigators could only make direct DNA comparisons with specific suspects. Detectives identified another lead in the case. Although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor confirmed there were no signs of sexual assault on her body. With this information, investigators developed a theory about what happened. Sarah arrived at the school nearly an hour early and was alone in the parking lot. It is believed her attacker saw her, waited for her to get out of her car, then hit her on the head with an object, knocking her unconscious. He then dragged her behind some trees, where her body was later found. The attacker removed some of her clothing, committed indecent acts, and then strangled her with her own socks. When one of the children who found Sarah's body mentioned a car in which the attacker supposedly escaped, detectives started looking for a Chevrolet Nova. They found such a car quickly, but the driver was just delivering donuts that morning. He gave a DNA sample, which did not match the DNA on Sarah's clothing. It seems the children just noticed the vehicle driving nearby and mistakenly believed the perpetrator was inside. None of the children could definitely recall seeing a man coming from the bushes to a car. In the following days, police officers continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but no significant progress was made. Classes resumed on Monday despite the recent tragedy. The murder had occurred just a few meters from the school, and the perpetrator was still at large with an unknown identity. The girls were scared to walk alone near the school, so boys from the sports teams decided to escort each female student to their car or bus to ensure they weren't left alone on the street. Investigators discovered there were about 70 potential witnesses at the school and nearby that morning. They interviewed each one, but no new information came to light. Using statements from the two children in the runner, a sketch of the attacker was made and shared with all local newspapers and TV stations. The story gained significant media attention, resulting in the police receiving hundreds of tips in the following weeks. Investigators thoroughly followed up on each tip, but none led to any breakthroughs. At one moment, they found a potential suspect who resembled the attacker's description and had a criminal history. However, this lead also proved fruitless because the suspect's DNA did not match the sample from the victim's clothing. The case remained inactive for months. The police received 4,000 tips and tried to follow up on each one, but the local police department didn't have enough resources to manage all the information. Additionally, time was against them because new cases demanded the investigators' attention every month. When Sarah's family found out that the police didn't have enough resources to handle all the tips, they decided to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a technology company and persuaded the company to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000, which was a lot of money in the 1990s. The company agreed, and the police used this computer to store all the tips in one place, process them quickly, and organize them for easy access. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, each tip went nowhere, and there was no progress in the following years. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates graduated. Before their graduation, they decided to honor her by raising a substantial amount of money to build a memorial. This memorial was a bench with Sarah's belongings cast in metal. Next to these items, there was a photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Over the years, the case was occasionally reopened, and all available evidence was re-examined, but the outcome remained unchanged. The perpetrator was still not found. During this time, the police interviewed several thousand people and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects, but all efforts were unsuccessful. In 2011, 2 decades after the murder, a detective decided to use modern technology. He learned about a company specializing in genetic genealogy. The detective reached out and asked if they could find relatives of the person whose DNA was found on the victim. The experts accepted the challenge, but they were unsuccessful. At that time, genetic genealogy was in its early stages, and the experts faced limitations in what they could do. For example, they were unable to search for both male and female relatives within the same sample. If they had a man's DNA, they could only look for connections with other men, and the same applied to women. Additionally, they encountered legal challenges due to laws that restricted using genetic data samples to identify relatives of suspects. Nonetheless, their efforts produced some interesting outcomes. The detectives contacted a research team that had been working for years on mapping the genetic lineage of the first people who arrived in the United States from Britain on the Mayflower in 1620. After analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found he was related to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracing him through this lineage was almost impossible, particularly given the challenges of those times. While the Mayflower carried just over 100 passengers, their descendants now number more than 25 million. Secondly, the detective didn't realize that he had turned Sarah's case into the first of its kind. Although his initial attempt was unsuccessful, it was the first crime to be attempted to solve with the help of genetic genealogy. The detective tried to use the available information and track down several men with the last name Fuller who lived in the area of the city at the time of Sarah's murder. He found photos of them and met with the only witnesses, a jogger and two men who had found the body when they were kids. Unfortunately, none of them recognized the killer in the photos. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. They contacted the company that had been analyzing the DNA sample from the assailant since 2011. By that time, DNA analysis technology had improved significantly, and the experts agreed to attempt to trace the assailant's ancestry. It took them 2 years of meticulous work using public databases to identify even distant relatives of the assailant. They then manually traced these relatives' family connections to people who lived around the time of Sarah's death. In total, they had to rule out several thousand people before finally making a breakthrough. In September 2019, investigators identified 2 new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were found to be descendants of Robert Fuller through DNA evidence. Experts concluded that a DNA sample from Sarah's clothing likely belonged to one of these brothers. At the time of the murder, Edward was 33 and Patrick was 27. The older brother, Edward, had a long history of violent crimes and had served time in prison. His DNA was already in the FBI database, so he could not have been involved in Sarah's murder. If he were the perpetrator, his DNA would have matched back in the 1990s. The younger brother, named Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested several times by the police for violent crimes, including those against minors. However, this happened before DNA samples from those criminals were added to the database. The detectives put the man under surveillance immediately. Patrick lived in a neighboring city called Wellington. The police had been following him for 2 days, and soon an opportunity arose. One day, Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke and threw a cigarette butt on the ground. An officer quickly collected it in an evidence bag and returned to his car. When Patrick stepped out to smoke again, a cloth handkerchief fell from his pocket. The officers picked it up, deciding to keep the handkerchief as a backup in case experts couldn't extract a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. The forensic experts successfully collected samples from all the items. The next day, they informed the detective that Patrick's DNA perfectly matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing from 1991. The judge quickly issued an arrest warrant for the man, and the police detained him. It took investigators 5 days to confirm his identity before they formally charged him with murder. When his background was leaked to the media, many questioned why someone with such a criminal history had not been considered a suspect for the past 28 years. At 19, Patrick Nicholas approached a young woman, got into her car, and attempted to assault her. The victim managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming a long distance to reach safety. He has a criminal record. Patrick served a 4-year prison sentence before being released. In 1994, he was arrested again for attempting to assault a minor. Although he was detained, his DNA was not entered into any database. This was because the charge at the time was not considered serious enough to warrant DNA collection, and the police did not encounter his name for 30 years. Additionally, he was not mentioned in any of the 4,000 leads generated over the years. Genetic genealogy experts couldn't link him to Robert Fuller because Patrick's biological lineage had been adopted, and he grew up with a different surname. One of the men who found Sarah's body as a child in 1991 immediately recognized Patrick as the killer. He confessed that the event had profoundly impacted him, especially since he was only 12 years old when they found the body and the killer had seen him. For years, he lived in fear that the murderer might come after him. It wasn't until Patrick was arrested that he finally felt safe. Patrick's trial started in 2023. He claimed he was innocent, and his lawyer tried to dispute the main evidence, which was DNA. The lawyer argued that finding Patrick's DNA on the victim's clothing didn't prove his guilt, but this argument was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this challenge baseless. In the end, Patrick was convicted of first-degree murder without premeditation. On May 25, he received a sentence of 45 years and 8 months in prison, making it almost impossible for him to be released. During the sentencing, Patrick showed no emotion, unlike Sarah's family. Her family spoke before the judge, expressing gratitude to everyone involved in the trial and the investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980, in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Cawley. Her parents divorced, and her mother remarried Bruce Jamon. Kendra had 3 sisters, Jamie Kalman, Ashley Lipham, and Melissa Jameson, and 1 brother, Neil Hatcher. She grew up in Pleasant Plains and pursued her studies in dentistry there. Following her divorce in 2010, she relocated to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone Dental Studio. Kendra, who had a strong Christian faith, aimed to use her dental skills to help others. The clinic, for instance, offered free services to disadvantaged children. In her free time, Kendra taught Bible studies and took part in volunteer programs, which involved building churches abroad and offering free dental care to children in Ecuador. Her career quickly took off, and her personal life thrived. On May 24, 2015, Kendra started dating Dr. Ricardo Paniagua. They met through a dating app, and from their first date, they became inseparable. Both shared similar values and interests and wanted the same things in life. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having been in a relationship for just a few months, he and his girlfriend were already talking about getting married. Unfortunately, a tragic incident in a parking lot claimed her life, ending all their future plans. Investigators who arrived at the massacre site assessed the crime scene and initially suggested a robbery, as Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. Beside her body, they discovered bullet fragments and a gun magazine. However, evidence from the shooting shifted the focus away from robbery. Kendra was shot twice. 1 bullet hit her back and another struck her head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, exciting through the chin, suggesting that Kendra had her hands raised behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was confirmed after the police obtaining CCTV footage, which helped reconstruct the events. The footage shows a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. Half an hour later, Kendra arrives home and parks in the same garage. A few minutes later, a man comes up to her, shoots her, and runs to the side, then jumps into the moving black Jeep. The videos were of poor quality and the crime scene couldn't be seen in them. The attackers couldn't be identified, but the vehicle was put on the wanted list. It was decided to release the images of the Jeep and the driver captured by the cameras to the media. The authorities asked the public for help, and that turned out to be effective. A man named Jose Luis Ortiz got in touch with the police. He reported that the car in the images was his, but made it clear that he wasn't involved in the shooting and wasn't drive. The vehicle. When questioned, Jose explained that on the morning of September 2nd, two of his friends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, asked him to fix their car and requested to borrow his Jeep until the evening. Jose agreed. He mentioned that later that evening, Brenda called Jose to a restaurant. That same evening, Crystal drove the Jeep come back to Jose's house. Therefore, the man was quite surprised when he saw his Jeep in the news. When Jose saw his Jeep on a TV show, he asked Brenda about it. At first, she said it was a different Jeep on the screen. Then, Brenda mentioned that Crystal had been traveling for work, and she didn't know anything about it. Brenda advised Jose not to tell anyone and just repaint the Jeep. Brenda agreed to pay for the Jeep to be painted. Meanwhile, Jose was waiting for a decision on his U.S. citizenship and wanted to avoid any issues with the police. He understood that Brenda had tricked him, so he went back to the police department to testify. He police monitored all the Jeep's movements that day and identified the two young women whom Jose had mentioned. Brenda Delgado was the first person investigators questioned. She claimed she didn't know Kendra and had never seen her before. When asked about her whereabouts on September 2nd at 7:42 p.m., Brenda provided an alibi, stating that she was at a restaurant with Jose and even presented receipts for the dinner. This raised questions about why someone would keep dinner receipts for so long. Eventually, with detailed investigation, the concealed truth behind the crime was uncovered. The central figure in the investigation was Brenda. She was born into a modest family, Luis and Maria Alado, who immigrated to Dallas from Mexico. Her father worked in a factory. They settled in a low-income neighborhood in southeast Dallas, where Luis found a job in construction, and Maria worked at the U.S. Post Office and cleaned houses. Brenda was their second child and only daughter. She was an excellent student, well-liked by her teachers, and worked part-time at a flower shop and as a waitress. Brenda was very ambitious and dreamed of attending medical school, but unfortunately, her parents couldn't afford the high tuition fees. After graduating from Skyline High School in 2000, she continued to live with her parents while dreaming of a prosperous and beautiful life. To achieve her goals, Brenda worked diligently. She was employed as a dental assistant and also worked at a department in North Park Center. In 2012, Brenda met Ricardo Paniagua and fell in love with him. Their first date, a dream come true for her, was at a Jennifer Lopez concert. In November 2012, just 3 months after meeting, Brenda moved in with Ricardo at his home in Fitzhugh Urban Flats. Ricardo was equally captivated by Brenda and even made an effort to meet her parents. In 2013, she posted on Facebook for his birthday. Brenda later found out she was pregnant, but at Ricardo's urging, she ended the pregnancy, which left her heartbroken. A bit recovered from the decision, Brenda decided to focus on her career and her beloved Ricardo. In the fall of that year, she started attending Sanford. Initially, it appeared that Brenda had moved past the emotional impact of the breakup, but this wasn't true. Her reliance on Ricardo intensified. When Ricardo shared a photo online with his new partner Kendra, who resembled a model, Brenda might feel jealous. Investigators, after gathering details about Brenda and her life, concluded that she had a motive to remove her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda was his ex-girlfriend. They had an on and off relationship from 2012 to 2015, the relationship ending a few months before Ricardo met Kendra. Ricardo believed that he and Brenda remained friends and didn't see any issues between Brenda and Kendra. After all, he had dated other women before meeting Kendra, so why would meeting her affect Brenda? Brenda believed she had come up with the perfect plan. to win back her ex-boyfriend and eliminate Kendra from his life. She started by offering him support and showed interest in his relationship with Kendra. In reality, she was aware of all their future plans, and Ricardo mistakenly thought her interest was genuine. Unfortunately, men often misunderstand women and sometimes trust them blindly. Brenda had been plotting her own plan for months. She had opened Ricardo's mail and knew all his plans with Kendra, even when and where they had booked tickets. All of this was infuriating to Brenda. She wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher, sincerely believing that she had taken Kendra's place. Brenda transferred Ricardo's account to her phone to monitor him closely. Following Ricardo and Kendra became her main focus in life. She became obsessed with stalking them, eventually quitting her job to dedicate all her time to this pursuit. Over time, Brenda developed a sinister plan to kill Kendra, whom she despised. To carry out this plan, Brenda approached several acquaintances, offering them money to harm Kendra. A mutual acquaintance introduced her to Crystal Cortez, a 21-year-old single mother facing severe financial difficulties. For just $500, Crystal agreed to help her. Following Brenda's instructions, Crystal contacted Christopher Love, who agreed to carry out the crime. Crystal gave Christopher $500 from Brenda along with 2 types of illegal substances. Kendra was being followed by 2 women who wanted to learn her habits and daily schedule to choose the best time and place for their crime. On September 2, 2015, they used Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher waited for Kendra in the parking lot. They didn't follow her home from work because they were worried about getting stuck in traffic. That evening, they successfully carried out their plan. A few days after the crime, Crystal and Christopher were arrested. The suspects denied their guilt and being at the crime scene. However, things changed when Christopher was found with the gun that killed Kendra in the side compartment of the car. Crystal, on the other hand, was nervous and constantly confused in her testimony, giving different testimony about why the SUV appeared in various parts of the city. In the initial questioning, Crystal confessed to being the driver in the parking lot. However, she insisted that she was forced there by an armed carjacker who had entered her SUV and made her drive. Trying to appear innocent, she falsely stated that her son was with her in the car. This claim was later disproved as security cameras did not show any child present. During the interrogation, as more evidence emerged, Crystal altered her testimony and sought to negotiate with the investigators. She agreed to testify against Brenda in exchange for a reduced sentence. Crystal informed the police that Brenda wanted Kendra dead and that the crime was Brenda's idea. Crystal stated that within 2 weeks of meeting Brenda, they started planning the crime. The CE found out that Brenda wasn't just sad because her relationship with Ricardo had ended, she was obsessed and desperate to win him back. She pretended to be happy about being his loyal friend, but her life started falling apart. She began to resent Kendra, believing she had taken her place. According to Crystal, it was at this moment that Brenda decided she wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher. That's when a plan to commit the perfect crime hatched in Brenda Delgado's mind. During her testimony, Crystal explained how Brenda came up with the perfect crime and enlisted her help. Together, Brenda and Crystal started planning to kill Kendra. They met several times and came up with various plans. The initial idea was to inject Kendra with illegal drugs or sedatives and then dispose of her. Brenda knew she needed a trustworthy accomplice to avoid suspicion, so she began the search. They drove through the rundown neighborhoods and asked several people for assistance. This is how they met Christ Ofer. He agreed to help and played a significant role in planning the details of the crime. The 3 of them decided together that the quickest way to kill her was to shoot her. During their collaboration, Crystal disclosed that September 2nd was intentionally selected. Brenda was aware that Kendra and Ricardo were planning a trip to Mexico, so they decided to eliminate her before the vacation. Brenda told Crystal she wanted the crime to appear as a failed robbery. Next, the criminals then selected the location for the murder. For days, they meticulously followed Kendra's movements, recording her every minute to ensure nothing altered for the chosen day. After her work hours, they tracked her path home and planned how to subtly access the apartment complex's secure parking garage. On September 1, 2015, they conducted a final check. On the morning of the crime, Brenda and Crystal picked up the Jeep from Jose and then picked up Christopher. Brenda was dropped off at the library in Caro Wilton to create an alibi, while Crystal and Christopher headed to Kendra's apartment complex. They waited across the street for about 30 minutes before driving to Kendra's workplace. After failing to follow her due to traffic, they went back to the house to wait. When Kendra arrived home, Christopher, wearing gloves, got out of the car, approached her with a gun, and shot her as she exited her vehicle. Crystal mentioned that she didn't witness the shooting but heard it. After that, she drove Christopher home, picked up her son from his grandmother, and later met Brenda at Jose's house to give him the Jeep. As a result, Brenda's dream was fulfilled. She was free from her despised rival and only needed to wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda felt delighted that she had executed the perfect crime. Crystal's honest confession and testimony against Brenda clearly proved Brenda's guilt, leading to a swift issuance of an arrest warrant. However, when police went to arrest her, Brenda was not at home. As a dual citizen, she escaped to Mexico. Following her escape, her role in arranging a contract killing was revealed, and she was added to the wanted list. On April 6, 2016, the FBI added Brenda to their list of most wanted fugitives, offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to her capture. She was the only woman on the list at that time and the 9th woman ever to be included. Just 2 days later, Mexican authorities arrested her in Torreon, Coahuila. She was extradited to the United States on October 6, under the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Once in the U.S., she was charged with capital murder in Texas, and her trial began in 2017. During the court hearing, the families of Kendra and Ricardo openly shared their feelings. Witnesses verified Brenda's harmful obsession with her ex-lover and her intentions. In court, Brenda's cousin Moses Martinez discussed his sister's depression following her breakup with Ricardo. He also disclosed that Brenda had offered him money to attack Kendra with a baseball bat, a proposal he declined. At the trial, Jennifer Escobar, Brenda's friend, testified that Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo. She recounted that Brenda would read all his emails and track his movements through his phone. Jennifer informed the jury that Brenda had a copy of his house key and access to his bank accounts. She also revealed that Brenda asked for her help to get rid of the hated Kendra, suggesting methods like injecting something lethal or using a bat to put her in a coma. Brenda offered Jennifer $2,000, a car, and illegal drugs in exchange for her help. Jennifer talked about this offer with her parents and decided to refuse it. It's odd that, when presented with the suggestion to harm or kill someone, but no one reported this threat to the police. Brenda's obsession was highlighted through evidence presented by several associates in court. It was found that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead, seeing H. or as a barrier to reuniting with Ricardo. Evidence revealed that Brenda's obsession grew significantly in the months before Kendra's death. During the hearing, an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500 was presented, which Brenda gave to Crystal as payment for her involvement. Christopher received a cash payment of $600. Cell phone records showed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime. Moreover, there were over 99 calls recorded between Brenda and Crystal from August 22 to September 4, demonstrating their constant communication to plan the murder of Kendra. The defendant's attorney attempted to place most of the blame on the actual perpetrators, but this strategy was unsuccessful. The defense claimed that Brenda was not present at the crime scene, offering an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant when the crime occurred. Although Brenda did not plead guilty, the jury disagreed with her defense. Brenda was found guilty of murdering Kendra, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after just 30 minutes of deliberation. Christopher, who directly committed the murder, admitted his guilt and was sentenced to death. Crystal cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, which resulted in her receiving a 35-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole. Kendra Hatcher's family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom after the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family never believed Brenda could be involved, as they knew her as a loving daughter and a woman with solid family values and Christian principles. In conclusion, the tragic case of Kendra Hatcher underscores the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy and obsession. Brenda Delgado's relentless pursuit to reclaim her past love led to a senseless crime that ended a life full of promise. The investigation revealed the intricate and disturbing lengths to which Brenda went to orchestrate Kendra's murder, revealing a dark side that was hidden beneath a facade of normalcy. The verdict delivered justice for Kendra and her family, but it also serves as a stark reminder of the profound impact that personal vendettas can have when they spiral out of control. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheila LaBarre. Sheila LaBarre was born in Fort Payne, Alabama on July 4, 1958. She was the youngest of 3 children and grew up on a farm surrounded by cornfields with her siblings, including her older brother and sister Lynn. According to Lynn, her older sibling, Sheila was an energetic, inquisitive, and creative girl. She loved being the center of attention, had a beautiful singing voice, and was very pretty. Her father Manuel Bailey's struggle with alcoholism had a profound impact on his family, especially his children, during their formative years. When affected, he became extremely aggressive and abusive, directing his anger at his wife and children. He would insult and humiliate them, attack them with any available object, and even force them to sleep outdoors, enduring the elements. Many times, Manuel's wife and children had no choice but to seek shelter in barns or fields, enduring harsh weather conditions such as heavy rain or freezing temperatures. Manuel's violent outbursts were a regular occurrence in the family. On one occasion, he threw dishes and objects at family members in a drunken rage. The mother tried to shield her children but was unsuccessful. A flower pot hit the youngest daughter, Sheila, in the head, causing her a severe concussion and leaving a permanent scar on her temple that she later covered with her hair. However, physical abuse was not the only trauma the sisters endured. According to Sheila and Lynn's memories, Manuel forced them into forced sex from a young age. Even though the mother may have known what was going on, she never addressed the problem or sought help for her daughters. Sheila studied very well, finding solace in her academic achievements in the midst of a difficult family life. She dreamed of escaping the countryside to pursue her ambitions in the city. With fierce determination and intense passion, Sheila aspired to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or a pop singer. She had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a wonderful voice. Sheila's upbringing was tumultuous. At the age of 18, she left her parents' house, but adult life was difficult. She did not pass the university entrance exam because of her average grades, and she simply did not have the money to move to the big city. Therefore, Sheila took a job as a maid in a hotel where her sister worked. Sheila had a slim figure and a very attractive appearance, big blue eyes, a charming smile, and long, thick hair. She was given attention by men, and over time, she learned to use that attention and manipulate her suitors. Sheila met Jonathan Baxter in the late 1970s and they began a romantic relationship. Although Jonathan was not yet 20 years old, he had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a barrier, and the couple soon married. However, their marriage did not last long and ended in divorce within a few months. The reason for the breakup was Sheila's treatment of Jonathan's daughter. She often became frustrated with the child and resorted to physical discipline, such as hitting her, or isolation, such as locking her in a closet when the child misbehaved or cried. When Jonathan discovered this, he was extremely distressed and immediately filed for divorce. He acted quickly, removing Sheila and her belongings from the house and making it clear that he never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila continued to date many men, and she often relied on them financially, but these relationships did not last long, lasting only a few weeks to a few months. However, in the early 1980s, she met Ronnie Jennings, who would later become her second husband. Their tumultuous love affair soon led to marriage. Unfortunately, it was an unhealthy relationship between two erratic and unstable people who often cheated on each other, caused scandals, and even fought. However, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after an argument, Sheila asked her husband for a divorce. But he refused. However, Ronnie's motive behind refusing her request was not to save the relationship. He just wanted to irritate his wife and drive her crazy. He succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large amount of drugs in front of her husband, drank strong alcohol, and after this terrifying cocktail, got behind the wheel and drove off the road. As expected, Sheila lost consciousness shortly after and drove off the road at high speed, crashing into a tree. Despite the severity of the accident, Sheila miraculously survived, although she suffered severe head injuries that left her in a deep coma for over a week. During this time, medical professionals were unable to give any prognosis for her recovery. Sheila eventually recovered from her coma and was transferred to a psychiatric hospital, where she remained for several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the attendants was constantly harassing her. After all this, she was discharged from the hospital and returned to her second husband's home. But her behavior became increasingly erratic. She began to act aggressively and threaten him, culminating in a violent outburst in which she attacked Ronnie with nail scissors, stabbing him in the chest. Fearing for her safety and well-being, Ronnie filed for divorce and quickly moved away, ending their tumultuous relationship. After her second divorce, Sheila began looking for a lover through the dating columns of print newspapers and left her information there. She posted her information herself in the hope of meeting someone special, but her relationships did not last long. The reason was that she had a controlling personality, often dominating her partners in both her private and daily life. One day, a 60-year-old man named Wilfred Bill Labar happened to see her picture in the dating section. A twice-divorced man, Wilfred raised his children and grandchildren from previous marriages. After losing his wife a few years ago, he lived a solitary life on his large rural farm. Wilfred, a wealthy man from New Hampshire, owned a chiropractic practice and a horse farm. Despite his successful life, he still felt lonely and longed for a partner. It was then that he met Sheila, who was attracted by Wilfred's wealth and saw an opportunity for her. To attract his attention, Sheila began sending him provocative letters and photos through the post. Her plan worked and soon Wilfred invited her to visit his farm. Their romance quickly blossomed, with Wilfred showering her with expensive gifts. In the summer of 1987, Sheila moved in with him. Wilfred Bill Labar had no plans to marry Sheila, however, without waiting for his proposal, Sheila changed her name, calling herself Labar. Bill was surprised by this development, but he did not object. As their relationship progressed, Sheila began to control Wilfred's life, including his business, finances, and property. Due to the significant age difference, Wilfred had a hard time satisfying Sheila's need for intimacy. According to Sheila, Wilfred allowed her to see other men and she often brought her lovers to their homes. One of Sheila's lovers, who was in his mid-90s, was a Jamaican citizen named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as a nanny at the farm. Wayne eventually moved into the main house with Wilfred's consent, possibly under pressure from Sheila. Sheila and Wayne married in 1995 with an agreement that they would be monogamous, and Wayne assumed that from then on, he would be her only man. However, he soon realized that he was wrong as his wife continued to see other men. Wayne was not happy with this, and one day, he punched and kicked Sheila and her next lover, injuring them. Sheila, accustomed to being dominated, was the first time she had been attacked by someone else. She eventually filed for divorce and obtained a court order to prevent Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Sheila's life remained volatile despite the divorce, as she continued to have affairs, frequently ending old relationships in favor of new ones. However, her relationships became increasingly complicated, often ending in lawsuits from her ex-partners who accused her of cruelty, threatening their lives, and causing physical harm. In one case, an ex-boyfriend claimed she deliberately hit him with her car, narrowly avoiding serious injury. Another accused her of fracturing his skull, while a third partner was left permanently scarred by lacerations to his face. As Sheila got older, her behavior became increasingly dangerous to those around her. She demanded absolute obedience from her partners, and when this expectation was not met, she often flew into rages. Wilfred Bill Labard then died in 2000 of heart failure at the age of 74. Although doctors and police found no evidence of foul play in his death, his family believed that Sheila had something to do with it. According to them, she had been poisoning Bill little by little over the years, effectively driving him to his death. After Wilfred's death, Sheila became the sole beneficiary of his estate, even though the couple had never formally married. Relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They still believe that Sheila forced him to write a will. She wanted the house after Wilfred's death. After inheriting his entire estate, Sheila was free to do whatever she wanted without having to consider anyone else's opinion. She called her home a place of glamour and pleasure, where there were no inhibitions. And she began picking up men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, luring them to her and then trying to keep them at the farm for as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or appearance. Sheila lured these men with promises of extraordinary pleasure and then tried to dominate and control them. Neighbors noticed that there were many different men constantly coming to the farm, but many left that day, while others stayed for a short time. The activities inside the house were shrouded in mystery. Sheila then turned her focus to finding sexual partners among men who were in financial trouble, needed a place to live, or were struggling with addiction. These people are easy targets for Sheila's manipulation tactics, as she presents herself as a wealthy widow, bragging about her supposed inheritance from 2004. A homeless man named Michael DeLog is struggling with addiction when he meets Sheila on a city street. Due to his circumstances, his family tries to get him into rehab, but he escapes from the treatment center. Michael's weakness leads him to accept Sheila's offer, who promises him food, shelter, and the stimulants he desires in exchange for a physical relationship. Moving to the farm, Michael becomes completely dependent on his lover. Afraid of being on the streets again, he complies with her every demand, and Sheila's desires become more sophisticated. She binds, beats, and humiliates Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they would not believe him. Sheila repeatedly found Michael and brought him back to the farm. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. They responded immediately, but unfortunately, it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLog mysteriously disappeared. When his family contacted Sheila, she claimed that they had broken up and Michael had left her, not knowing where he was. Despite efforts to find him, Michael was nowhere to be seen and no one he knew had seen him. Unfortunately, attempts to contact him were unsuccessful and the police report was fruitless, and Sheila remained unsuspected. While her house and car needed maintenance, so she was forced to find work. She chose a career that suited her, becoming an operator for intimate telephone services, using her charming voice to make a living. A man named Kenneth County, then 24 years old, fell into the trap and agreed to meet her in person. Kenneth was an attractive young man, kind and open, but he had one major weakness: his low IQ made him extremely gullible. This made him Sheila's ideal target. Kenneth was very close to his mother, financially dependent on her, but Sheila skillfully manipulated him, creating a rift between them and finally conquered him. She gave him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams. He informed his relatives, and then moved into Sheila's house. After that, Sheila severely and relentlessly abused Kenneth. She had turned one of the rooms in her house into a torture chamber, where she regularly beat Kenneth severely and subjected him to other forms of physical and mental abuse. As a result, Kenneth's body was covered in numerous injuries, including bruises, abrasions, cuts, and burns. Kenneth was completely under Sheila's control and was not allowed to contact his loved ones. His family had no idea what was happening to him and could only speculate about his condition. It was only when neighbors occasionally saw Kenneth and were shocked by his frail appearance that the alarm was raised. Just days before Kenneth went missing, a local store employee took a disturbing photo of him with his cell phone, which was later used as evidence in court. The photo showed Kenneth extremely thin, with large bruises under his eyes and on his cheeks, and what appeared to be a broken nose, judging by the extent of the healing. All of these injuries occurred at different times, suggesting that he had been severely beaten over a long period of time. When he went to a store, the items in his trolley were disturbing: 2 large fuel drums, which were later discovered to have been used to cremate him. The store staff were confused and frightened by his appearance, so they contacted the police, suspecting a possible domestic violence incident. However, Sheila escaped and they were unable to charge her. Eventually, Kenneth lost contact with his family, and when his worried mother visited him at the farm owner, Sheila, responded aggressively and advised her to leave Kenneth alone, prompting Kenneth's family to file a missing person report, expressing concern that he might be being held against his will at the farm. When the police arrived at Sheila's home, they witnessed a crematorium and disturbing discoveries. Sheila claimed that Kenneth had moved away because his mother, whom he said was afraid of him, had begun visiting regularly. To back up her claim, Sheila provided a recording in which she asked Kenneth if his mother had attacked him, and he quietly replied yes. The police found Sheila's story suspicious, and the next day, a police officer who visited Sheila obtained a search warrant for the estate. This was not the first time Sheila had attracted the attention of the police. She had been implicated in the mysterious disappearance of another boyfriend in the past. However, despite her past, Sheila had never been questioned or had her property searched until now. When the police arrived, they could not find Sheila at home, but they did notice several suspicious fires burning near the outbuildings. These fires were very unusual and involved a variety of materials such as mattresses, pieces of wooden furniture, hay, and other items soaked in flammable substances. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that one of the fires contained human remains in the form of bones. Police immediately requested additional assistance from forensic experts to document their findings, but what they discovered next was even more shocking. Police found numerous blood stains that had not been cleaned up throughout the house, indicating a violent crime had occurred. The large amount of blood suggested that a horrific massacre may have occurred. The blood found at the scene belonged to at least 3 different people. The body found in a fire was identified as that of the missing Kenneth County. 2 empty fuel cans were discovered nearby, matching the cans Kenneth had purchased at a local store the day before his disappearance. Further investigation uncovered the body of Michael DeLog, who had been missing for several years. Police also found several fingers belonging to an unidentified third person. In addition, a large number of items, believed to have belonged to several men due to their varying sizes, were recovered from the farm's storage pit, but their owners remain unknown. Sheila was not present at the time of the police visit, as she had already discovered them and planned to flee. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston to evade arrest. Along the way, she hitched a ride with a driver and eventually formed a relationship with him, leading him to invite her to stay with him. However, the next day, after watching a TV news report about a manhunt for a dangerous criminal, the driver called the police and reported that Sheila was currently in his bed. A disturbing discovery was made during the search of Sheila's home, a collection of videotapes. The recordings depicted men, including Kenneth, Michael, and several others, confessing to serious crimes. However, the men's visible distress and condition suggested that these confessions had been coerced through torture. After Sheila was arrested, concerns about her mental health prompted the court to order an evaluation. The results showed that Sheila suffered from delusional disorder and symptoms of schizophrenia. She believed that she was an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. Her attorney used her poor mental health to create a defense, portraying her as terminally ill and unaware of her actions. This claim was based on severe mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. Sheila claimed that, years earlier, she had had a near-death experience after being in an accident and falling into a coma. During this time, she said, she encountered God and was tasked with ridding the world of men who harmed children. Sheila's ex-husbands and several of her lovers also took the stand in court, all of whom described her as insane, unstable, and extremely violent. In particular, her third husband, Wayne Anise, claimed that Sheila had repeatedly urged him to kill Wilfred Bill LaBar, apparently motivated by his desire to take his estate. However, the defense team's efforts to portray Sheila as insane and in need of psychiatric care were unsuccessful. Instead, it was determined that she was fully aware of her actions when she committed the crime. Sheila was ultimately convicted in July 2008 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Any appeals she filed were subsequently denied. Sheila is currently serving her sentence at the Homestead Correctional Facility in Florida.